Good afternoon. Will the Committee of Supply please come to order? This section of the Committee of Supply will now consider the estimates of the Department of Families. Does the Honourable Minister have an opening statement?
I do. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. It is an honor to be here.
Minister Squires? Sorry, I just have to recognize you. Minister Squires, go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. It is an honor to be here today as the Minister of Families for Committee of Supply. And I'd like to first of all take the opportunity to thank all of my departmental staff, people who work incredibly hard day in and day out all throughout the year, and then have really worked exceptionally hard during the COVID pandemic to ensure that some of our people living in the province of Manitoba, some of our most vulnerable people, have had access to the support services that they desperately need and the information that they absolutely desperately need. And I just am really grateful for my Deputy Minister, Catherine Girard, and my Assistant Deputy Ministers and my directors who just continue to impress me on a daily basis. And it is an honor to work side by side with these folks. I also want to pay tribute, if I could, to all the members of our community stakeholder groups. These are people who are on the front lines working towards providing services. These are our early learning and childcare workers. These are everyone involved in the childcare sector. These are people working in community living disability services, going to work every day to ensure that people have a quality of life, even at a risk to themselves. And we were very humbled to work alongside these people, as well as to offer them some risk recognition pay and to ensure that they know that they are valued and that the work that they do is incredibly beneficial, and that we're thankful for the work that they do. We know that this year has been an absolute year of transformation. Every sector has been challenged because of the pandemic. And when we come out of this pandemic, in order to have a robust economy, we need a robust early learning and childcare sector. That is why our government has made additional investments. We have made Budget 21 included more than $180 million for the childcare sector, $25 million more than the former government had ever invested in childcare. We know that more work needs to be done in terms of getting the robust childcare sector that Manitoba families want and deserve. And we are very pleased to continue down the path of doing that work for enhancing the early learning childcare sector. That is why we introduced Bill 47. That is why we've also made additional investments. Earlier this spring, I was very pleased to make a $4.4 million financial stability announcement for the childcare sector with the COVID-19 response block grant, along with my colleague, Minister Jim Carr at the federal level. Just again, recently, I was very pleased to offer another COVID response grant, which provided additional money to childcare sectors, as well as providing money for before and after school programming. We know that a lot of parents right now do not have that are not able to utilize before and after childcare, and that is and having to we don't want them to have to pay their parent fees. So we're working with the sector so that parents do not have to pay their fees, and that the child care centers are not out of money. When it comes to child and family services, we know that we have child welfare transformation is an absolute priority for this government and for my department. And we have come quite a ways in reducing the number of children who are in the child care system. We have ended the birth alert practice that was something that we had inherited, and we're working with our 4 authorities and all our agencies throughout the province and all of everyone involved in the child and family services as we go through this transformation, working with our Indigenous governing bodies, wanting to empower them to the best of our ability as we work through the transformation into implementing the federal legislation, the C-92 legislation, to ensure that our Indigenous governing bodies are established and positioned for success. And that is something that myself and my federal colleagues are committed to working towards when it comes to the child welfare transition as outlined in Bill C-92. We're also pleased to have redirected an additional resources to community partners. And we're seeing amazing work from many of our community partners. Granny's House, for example, is seeing so many kids being diverted out of care because there is appropriate respite right here in the community. We certainly do believe that community intervention and community work is a great method for ensuring that more families are kept together and that apprehension rates continue to go down. Very pleased to work with Granny's House and Mount Carmel Clinic, the Mothering Project, the Super Dads program, Toba Center. We gave them an additional $400,000 to ensure that they could do their work in working with to support children who've experienced abuse, and really committed to ensuring that all children are well supported in the province of Manitoba. In terms of Manitoba Housing, our government is providing over $135 million to Manitoba Housing. We've created 730 new units since we took office. And one of the things that we recently did, it started off as a Mission 50, it's now a Mission 68, where we renovated 50 vacant suites or 68 vacant suites. And we found people who were either homeless or precariously housed, and we got them into their homes. And then we also provided the wraparound supports. We provided an additional $2.5 million for the wraparound supports so that they would have the tools that they need to live independently and successfully. And we have 68 people tonight who have a home and are very successfully housed. And I know that we have a long way to go in terms of addressing the homelessness issue. Our government invested $28.4 million last year alone on homelessness, as well as an extra about $5 million for the COVID response, because we know that people who are it's hard to isolate or stay at home when you don't have a home. And so we've made additional investments and alternate isolation units for that segment of the population. Definitely a lot more work to do. $5.6 million rent bank, first time in the province that we've ever had a rent bank. And we know other jurisdictions around the country have rent banks have said that this is a key to diverting homelessness. And so very pleased about that, and continuously creating these new units of housing for people who need housing. And lastly, I just want to touch upon our support for people with disabilities. I'm pleased that this most recent budget, we invested an additional $12.5 million for the Community Living Disability Services Program. We recognize the importance of ensuring that adults with intellectual disabilities continue to be supported to live inclusive and meaningful lives in the community. And I'm certain that I'm running out of time, but I do want to state that I have a bill before the legislature that will create a new income support program for people living with disabilities. We think that this is incredibly vital. Not only will it provide additional resources, but it will provide more dignity for people who are living with disabilities and have fewer means. And this is one way that we can recognize and make life easier for people with disabilities. We are also working towards implementing accessibility legislation, enacting the standards, and ensuring that they're being reviewed. There's a 5-year review right now on the first standard regarding customer service. That standard has been in place since November 2015, and we are hearing from community as to what areas we've gotten that are working and what areas need to be strengthened, and really wanting to ensure that that is strengthened accordingly. And the other standards will be enacted over the next year, and I'd be more than happy to talk about that in some subsequent opportunities that I have. But in closing, I just really want to thank everybody. It is also a tremendous, humbling opportunity to be the co-chair of the Poverty Reduction Committee, along with my colleague, Minister of Education, to really work. We know that when it comes to child poverty and poverty reduction, we've come a short ways. We've got ways to go as well, and our work won't be done until all children are out of poverty. And that is something that myself, my co-chair, and this committee is committed to doing to ensure that there are fewer Manitoba children living in poverty. So with that, again, I want to express my gratitude to my department and gratitude to all our community partners who are helping us eradicate child poverty, increase housing, and increase the quality of living for all Manitobans. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
And we thank the minister for those comments. Does the critic from the official opposition have an opening statement?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, I do.
Ms. Adams, go ahead.
Thank you. Before I start my opening statements, I would just like to confirm that you're able to see me properly. I know during committee that there was some issues with you being able to see me.
No, we're good.
Thank you so much for confirming that for me, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, life has become less affordable for renters and low-income Manitobans during this pandemic. As this government has cut the portable housing benefit, clawed back EIA, and cut operating funding for nursery school programs across Manitoba. This government continues to sell off social housing units. They don't renovate the housing units, and the wait list is growing. Like homes on Planet Road this past week is just one example. This government has sold off 1,500 social housing units since 2016, and while the wait list for social housing continues to grow, they do not have an answer how to address this. Homelessness has increased under this government. In Winnipeg alone, there are up to 1,500 people unsheltered every single day, and that is just unacceptable, and it needs immediate answers. Manitobans with disabilities are struggling through this pandemic with limited programming available and not enough investments from this government to support them. This government continues to fail to invest in the public for-profit, nonprofit childcare, leaving parents and providers with few supports and lots of questions and growing number of concerns. These, along with many other issues, are just the few issues I am hearing from Manitobans every single day. Manitobans want answers, and they deserve answers from this government on this issue and many others that impact them, like childcare, housing, inclusion supports, and many more. I look forward to the opportunity to discuss these issues further and ask that I am hearing from Manitobans and work through estimates debate over the coming days. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
And I thank the member for those comments. Under Manitoba practice, debate on the minister's salary is the last item considered for a department in the Committee of Supply. Accordingly, we shall now defer consideration of line item 9.1 subsection A contained in Resolution 9.1. Does the committee wish to proceed through estimates of this department chronologically or a global discussion?
Global discussion, please.
Thank you. If it is agreed then that questioning for this department will proceed in a global manner with all resolutions to be passed once questioning has concluded. Therefore, the floor is now open for questions. Ms. Adams.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. The question I've got is, the Families Department underspent by $36 million in 2021 in the estimates books. This underspending is attributed to unexpenditures by adult and children disability services. What is the child care subsidy program and housing reflected reduced services during the pandemic? Why was these under expenditures reallocated to people with disabilities?
Minister Squires.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Very pleased to put some information on the record in regards to our CLDS budget for 2021. It was $473 million. The year before, in 1920, it was 461. So I believe that the member should be corrected in that there hasn't been a reduction in the budget, but rather an investment in the budget, because 473 over 461 is an additional $12 million. Now that is just in the regular budget. We also did have a number of initiatives for COVID relief, because we know that our sectors were hit hard. We know that people experiencing disabilities had exceptional needs during this time of the pandemic, and the people that work in that sector also had exceptional circumstances, and they went to work every day, and we wanted to provide some benefit for and recognition for that pay. So the one initiative that we announced last May 26th, exactly 1 year ago today, the Disability Economic Support Program, that was worth $4.6 million. And it was for all EIA participants in the disability category had received a one-time support of $200 in early June of 2020. This payment is not considered taxable income and will not affect any other benefits received. And it was just to certainly help out with some additional dollars for people living with disabilities. We also had the risk recognition program, which was $121.7 million to date, which some of that money offered a one-time payment to eligible frontline essential workers who took extraordinary steps to keep Manitobans safe by working over 200 hours in the periods of March 20th, 2020 to May 29th. Of last year's pandemic. And this included many of our workers in the CLDS sector. And then we also had a $35 million caregiver wage support program that provided a $5 per hour wage supplement to eligible frontline workers that provide direct patient or residential care to vulnerable Manitobans between November 1st, 2020 and January 10th, 2021, which definitely included many of our workers in that sector. I'd like to just highlight that those expenditures did not come from our CLDS budget that had seen an increase of $12 million between 1920 and 2021. Those were additional COVID-related enhancements that we had made to ensure that people living with disabilities was supported. I'd also like to highlight a recent announcement that I made in end of March about establishing an accessibility trust with the Winnipeg Foundation. It was $20 million that will provide an annual revenue stream for individuals, municipalities, organizations, or nonprofits who are wanting to enhance their accessibility, whether that's renovating their bricks and mortar, whether that's ensuring that they've got better technology, websites, information, whether it's more reading materials that are available to a broader segment of the population. That money will be available for those entities to apply for year over year over year. This is in perpetuity, so that each year we can ensure that more businesses, more individuals, more nonprofits, more organizations are able to comply with our accessibility legislation and even go further and enhance accessibility features so that all Manitobans can live freely and with dignity in the province of Manitoba. So again, really, again, very pleased to have enhanced that budget for our community living disability services. And we know that there's more work to be done, and our government is certainly up to the challenge, and very pleased to have the partnership of many businesses, organizations, nonprofits, and municipalities when we had announced that accessibility fund, and look forward to another year of serving people with disabilities to ensure that they get the services that they need.
Ms. Adams.
Thank you. And I thank the minister for the response. However, that was not my question, and I do apologize if my question was not clear. I do talk fast, so I will work hard on slowing down. My question was pertaining to about the $36 million that was left unspent by the government, and it was attributed to under expenditures in adult and children's disability services. So why was that not money reallocated and spent to support adults and children with disabilities if it was left unspent?
Minister Squires.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I thank the member for the clarification. But I do have to say that the $36 million figure that she's citing is not something that we have confirmed. We're still working through our closeout of last year, so we certainly don't have that $36 million figure that she's citing as something that is confirmed. We do know that there were fewer services based on the pandemic that were offered throughout the year because of the requirement for social distancing, the requirement for some self-isolation, and the requirement for compliance with some of our public health orders, that some day programs and some of the transportation associated with those day programs saw some decreases in their budgets. We are still finalizing those numbers. I'll be very happy to report to the critic and to all members of the legislature those final numbers when they are confirmed. But we know that there was some reductions in expenditures in that regard. However, those were offset, or where we made more increases in the past year was spending in residential services, that we had more people staying at home, and where it was safe to do so, that we took the programming into their own homes. So there was increased in expenditures in our residential services for people living with intellectual disabilities. And we also did give an additional $1.1 million to Abilities Manitoba so that they could also help us with the initiative of ensuring that services are being delivered to our clients in the CLDS program in different manners. And again, we do know that there was some day programming and transportation that didn't occur, transportation costs that weren't incurred because more people were staying at home and some of the programming was not being offered in the traditional manner. But again, I will be more than happy to confirm for the House the official expenditure in that category. But like I said, my department is still working through a lot of that information right now.
Ms. Adams.
I would like to thank the minister for that response. Could the minister provide us with an updated and further breakdown of organizational charts with staff names and positions?
Minister Squires?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thanks to the member for the question. As she's probably aware, we do have a significant number of employees in the Department of Families and a fairly large org chart. Instead of me reading it out right now, I would ask if it would be sufficient if I send her a copy of that flow chart and all members of the House. I see she's giving me the thumbs up. That's excellent. I'll just put this on the record right now in advance of any potentially her future question. For 21-22, the Department of Families has 2,436.4 FTEs. That is an increase of 478.5 FTEs. And as soon as I get that org chart, I will send you an electronic copy.
Ms. Adams?
And I thank the minister for sending me the org chart when she has it. As of March 31st, 2020, there were 440 vacant positions at the Department of Families. And the minister said on February 2nd, 2021, that there were 357 vacant positions in the department, including 102 at the Department Manitoba Developmental Center due to their closure. Could the minister provide a current vacancy rate for the Manitoba families?
Minister Squires?
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I do want to start by talking about MDC. As members of the committee will know, our government is moving towards closure of MDC, and we're working to successfully transition all of those residents into community. And one of the things that was really important when we announced the 3-year closure was that we had a staffing stabilization plan in place. Now, members will know that we do have 102 vacant FTEs at MDC, but we also have appropriate staffing levels at the center right now with that stabilization plan in place, so that until that very last resident transitions out of MDC, there will be an appropriate number of staff in place at MDC. Now, further to the member's question about the vacancy rate, it is 11.8% as of March 31st, 21 for vacancy in the Department of Families. That means that there are 365.2 FTEs that are vacant. However, we do have 134 staffing approvals in place, which means we're actively recruiting for those positions, which means we have 231 net vacancies.
Ms. Adams?
Thank you, Minister. And Mr. Chair, now we'll move on to childcare. With nearly 19,000 children on the wait list for childcare in our province, we need investments in public, not-for-profit childcare is evident more so than ever now than before. What is the minister's plans to invest the remainder of the money from the money that was allocated to the chamber that has gone unspent by almost 8%? To the nonprofit childcare centers immediately?
Minister Squires?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So just to the point about the search tool, I know the member referenced the search tool that was created from very many members of the community, from the Parent Advisory Committee, as well as several individuals. We had hundreds and hundreds of Manitobans provide us with advice through Engage MB when we were consulting on childcare, tell us that that search tool was not, and that wait list that was created by the former government was not something that was working in the way that they would like it. Parents have said to us that they want a search tool that is more flexible, that also allows them to see the vacancies and the ability to find childcare by their specific area. And so one of my top priorities is to modernize that ability for parents to be connected with the childcare that they want and that is specific to their family needs. And so we are in the process of revising and modernizing a childcare wait list. That is something that I've promised the community that I will deliver on in the very near future, because we know that the current wait list that was established by the NDP that had people putting their names on multiple lists. A lot of families were putting their names on their childcare center of wish wait list, as well as registering with that centralized database. And we're working more directly with their childcare center of choice and not really hearing back from that centralized wait list as to what their status was, what the availability was in their community, and so forth. So we certainly want to take a more direct approach and be able to give parents a lot more information and connect them more quickly and with childcare options of choice in their community. We know that right now we have a solution that we put in place in the early days of the pandemic for people to find childcare. It is an online tool called the Childcare Finder, and that is allowing parents to quickly find out if there is childcare available in their, preferred place, and they can register on that wait list accordingly. We know that right now we have an anomaly in childcare. I don't think ever before in the province's history have we had 4,170 vacancies in childcare, in the childcare sector as a whole, like we have as of May 7th. That was our vacancy number. And we know that that is a result of this pandemic. And as I've said earlier in some of my comments, we know that key to having a robust economy in the post-pandemic era is having a robust childcare sector. And so we look forward to working with all of our childcare centers and all Manitoba families to ensure that everyone has childcare when they need it, where they need it, so that they can go back to work and resume their lives once this pandemic is in the rearview mirror. We know that we've also been able to provide childcare and prioritize those who are critical services and essential workers to ensure that our firefighters, our frontline emergency personnel, our doctors, our nurses, and everyone who needs childcare to work in the pandemic is able to get childcare. And so the Childcare Finder has been an essential tool at helping people get that information and register. In relation to the money that was provided to the Chamber of Commerce, that was at the onset of the pandemic, where we did provide $18 million for the quick, rapid creation of new childcare spaces. And we have, to that end, in the early days of the pandemic, after the $18 million endowment was provided to the Chamber, $3.52 million was spent to create childcare spaces, and we're incredibly grateful that there were many people who developed childcare spaces in the wake of the onset of the pandemic, when there was so much uncertainty, and yet we did see so many people come forward and provide childcare spaces to ensure that our doctors, nurses, critical service employees were able to get that childcare. Further to the expenditure of the $18 million that went to the chamber, we diverted $9.5 million out of the chamber fund into the Child Care Sustainability
Minister's
Trust.
time has expired. Ms. Adams.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The minister speaks of vacancies. Could she please provide a detailed breakdown of where these childcare vacancies are located and whether or not they are public or private spaces?
Minister Squires.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just to wrap up what I was saying earlier about the $18 million expenditure that or endowment with the chamber, we did divert $9.5 million to the Child Care Sustainability Trust that went to the Winnipeg Foundation. Now that trust is at $11 million, and this will create an annual intake for child care centers to apply to get discretionary or auxiliary items that may be outside of their budget, and a new revenue stream for them, and an intake that they can apply to each year to get additional dollars into their center. And we are currently working, $4.7 million is unspent of that $18 million. And that is currently, we're working with the Winnipeg Chamber to create ethnically diverse and culturally appropriate spaces. And that work is ongoing. It's delayed because of COVID, of course, but it will be creating new childcare spaces. And I will be very pleased to provide the member and all members of the legislature an update as soon as possible. In regards to the 4,170 vacancies, I'd like to also just point out that any vacant space that is public in a nonprofit continues to be funded, whether they are vacant, whether it's being vacant or it's being utilized. Our government has flowed the operating dollars to all of our funded spaces, regardless, because we know this pandemic has been incredibly hard on our child care centers and our families. And so that money has continued to flow uninterrupted from the province of Manitoba, even though those spaces have been vacant. I'd also like to just remind the member that 90% of all spaces in Manitoba are nonprofit, upwards of 90%. Fewer than 10% in this province are for profit. And so she can surmise that I don't have the breakdown of private versus profit, nonprofit of that 4,170 vacancies, but we can estimate that there would be fewer than 41 of those spaces being from the private sector and the remainder being in the public, based on the ratio that we know is true here in the province of Manitoba. And we know that that the member and many others have advocated for a system, a universal system such as what they have in Quebec. And I would also like to just highlight that in Quebec, it's 20% for-profit and 80% nonprofit. We certainly don't strike that balance here in Manitoba. Our ratio is 90-10, and the average in Canada is 26 to 74. So again, we know in Manitoba we have the lowest number of private for-profit childcare spaces and the highest number of nonprofit spaces in Manitoba. And of course, that is something that our government is committed to. That is why we've enhanced our budget for our for-profit spaces. And that is why we'll continue to build the child care sector. But when I chat with parents, what's important to parents is they want affordable, accessible childcare. And that is what our government is committed to doing. We're not interested in taking an ideological approach. We're interested in creating childcare spaces in the province of Manitoba.
Ms. Adams.
Thank you. Would the minister commit to taking it as an undertaking to provide the numbers for the vacancies for a nonprofit? How many spaces are available that are private and public?
Minister Squires.
Thanks. So in our childcare finder right now, we do not have the opportunity to search by the category that the members asked for. But what I will commit to her is that as we're modernizing the registry for families to find affordable, accessible childcare, we will make sure that we have greater flexibility in the search options so that information can be determined very quickly and easily to have that data and statistical analysis of our spaces that are vacant versus non-vacant.
Ms. Adams?
I thank the minister for that. Early learning and childcare will see an increase of $3.8 million attributed to incremental operating grants for newly created childcare spaces. But financial assistance is the same for sub-appropriations will actually get. Will the minister explain how this cut will actually impact childcare centers?
Minister Squires.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. One of the things that our government has been committed to is creating additional childcare spaces. We know that families have expressed very loud and clear that they need affordable, accessible childcare, and that is the number one priority for us. And so the quickest way for us to ensure that we've got more spaces is obviously to fund more spaces. I can say that since we formed office, our annual 5-year average for space creation is 1,045 new spaces a year. It fluctuates a little bit. I know in 2016-17, we created 1,184 new spaces. What I can say is under the NDP's time, and I just want to highlight this to compare and contrast, we had a backlog of unfunded spaces when we formed office, meaning there was a lot of spaces that were not able to offer affordable childcare under those regulated rates that go with having a funded space, which meant more parents were having to pay greater fees under the unregulated fee schedule that an unfunded space can charge. So we wanted to bring more spaces into the system by funding them. What I can say is that there were years under the NDP that they funded fewer than 500 spaces a year, 429 spaces in one particular year, 391 spaces in another year, 92 new funded spaces in another year. What that created was pressure in the system because it was being chronically underfunded, that new spaces were not being funded under the NDP. When we formed office, we had major major backlog in unfunded spaces. So we have increased the number of spaces that we're bringing into the system to fund them. And then we've created some additional revenue streams, such as the Child Care Sustainability Trust, $11.5 million with the Winnipeg Chamber and other initiatives for the child care sector. And I would also note that we are currently in the process of working with our federal partners on a bilateral agreement for stabilizing the childcare sector. Very grateful for some of the cooperation that we've had thus far. And like I said earlier, in March, we were able to give $4.4 million through that bilateral initiative to our childcare nonprofits that were struggling in the province because of the pandemic. But for us, the first priority was funding more spaces, which we've accelerated at a greater pace because we had that backlog to address. Now that we're starting to see where we may be caught up to the need, then we can also shift priorities. But right now, we will continue to be bringing more spaces into the system than was created under the previous government, address that backlog, and work to ensure that we've got the second lowest, maintaining the second lowest parent fees in the country so that all families can have affordable, accessible childcare in the province of Manitoba.
Ms. Adams.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The government has claimed 96 out of the 2,992 licensed nursery school spaces in Manitoba will see an increase in their operating funding under the province's new funding formula. What is the number of licensed nursery spaces that will receive a cut?
Minister Squires.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So we know that we had 96 nursery school programs that were receiving $545 per week. And now they are receiving $1,045 per week if they're offering 5 sessions. There's a rather complex formula for determining this, but ultimately, if you're a nursery school program and you offer 5 sessions per week, we're now giving you $1,045 per week. So that's nearly double the amount that we were giving these 96 programs to equalize that. On the flip side, there was all programs now are receiving the $1,045 dollars per week. There were 66 that were receiving a different amount that was created by the former government. They had initially rolled out a program to say that all nursery schools would be enhanced, yet they stopped making that option available to other nursery school programs and closed the intake several years ago. It has been at least 7 years since any nursery school was able to apply to enter into an enhanced program. So ultimately what it was is it was a 2-tiered system. It was never income tested. So we had a lot of spaces that were receiving a much different rate in other areas of that were offering nursery school at rates that were not two families and not having it income tested. So we had inequities in the system, and we needed to create a more equitable system, and that all our nursery school programs now in the province are receiving that $1,045 per week. I know that there are several families have been able to now afford nursery school because of this, and that there is more equities in the system.
Ms. Adams.
Thank you. I wonder if the minister could explain why they chose to cut the funding to those 66 programs. Instead, they could have had the choice to have all of the programs in Manitoba receive the same funding that the 66 centers are receiving, instead of cutting those 66 centers.
Minister Squires.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Our government recognizes the need for affordable, accessible childcare and nursery school. That is why we have a childcare subsidy program, and so that we have families that we're working with that need supports from government to access the services that they need, and that is why we're working with them. Program, which is available to all low-income families in the province, and we are maintaining second lowest parent fees in the country and working towards creating additional spaces and having affordable, accessible childcare throughout the province of Manitoba.
Ms. Adams.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, so I'll ask the minister again. The minister asks about equalization, and they did this so that all the centers will be funded the same. But instead of going to the higher dollar amount, they went to the lower dollar amount. So I wonder why. I wonder if the minister could please explain why they chose to not go to the higher amount, and they chose, which was an active choice, to go to the lowest bottom dollar.
Minister Squires.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And here we have a consecutive pattern with the member opposite who continues to put misinformation on the record and doesn't check with her facts before she speaks. And we've seen that time and again with this member when she talks about our investments in, whether it be in the childcare sector, whether it be in housing or other programs. And one thing that we can all agree on is that we need to build more affordable, accessible childcare in the province of Manitoba. And the dollar speaks volumes in the sense that our government is creating more spaces than the NDP ever did. The rolling 5-year averages speak for themselves, where we're creating more spaces every year, year over year, than the NDP ever did, where they were funding, some years funding 300 new spaces. We're funding 1,000 new spaces on average every year because we know that the need is there. And so it's important to get the facts straight. And the member had said that something about the lowest number. Well, the fact is that we took 96 96 nursery programs that were also serving children in some low-income neighborhoods and in some low-income families. I know of some low-income families who were who, for all intents and purposes, should have been receiving a spot in the enhanced nursery program, but they were not able to access that, and therefore they were paying a higher rate because their nursery school program was only receiving, under the NDP, $545 per week. What we did is we doubled the amount that those 96 programs were receiving. So we went from $545 per week to $1,045 per week. That's not the lowest. The lowest is what the NDP funded. What we funded was double that at $1,045, so that the low-income families, it doesn't matter if you're living in my constituency of Riel, in the member's constituency of Thompson, in any other constituency in the province of Manitoba, that parents and families with need, regardless of where they lived, could access affordable, accessible childcare or nursery programs. And we doubled the funding for 96 spaces in the province of Manitoba.
Ms. Adams.
Well, Mr. Chair, I'm going to move on to the recent federal budget that pledged over $30 billion over the next 5 years to reduce childcare fees by 50%. With a plan for a 50-50 cost share with the provinces and territories. This is a significant federal investment. Can the minister share if the province plans to step up and fund their part of this plan?
Minister Squires.
Thanks. So I'd be more than happy to clarify for the member that there is a process when it comes to a bilateral agreement, and really appreciate the cooperation and the collaboration that I do have with my federal counterparts. And I have met and spoke with Minister Ahmed Hussein several times on a variety of issues concerning childcare and early learning in the province of Manitoba. And we are negotiating the details through a bilateral. These are certainly things that need to be negotiated, and terms of agreement need to be drawn up, and we need to have agreements in place. So when the federal government is ready to present that opportunity to Manitoba, we'll certainly be in negotiations with the federal government. And I can share with the member, since I have had the opportunity to work through some bilateral agreements with the federal government, whether it's on housing or whether it's on other initiatives and some of the other portfolios I've had, it is a fairly detailed process that must be undertaken to ensure that all parties are certainly aware of what they're signing on to. So to that end, I can say Manitoba right now, we've increased our budget. Budget 21 offers more investments in childcare than ever before. We've invested $25 million more than the NDP ever invested in childcare, and that was based on Budget 21's commitments. We're going to continue to be making our investments on our end, and really looking forward to the federal government providing supports for affordable, accessible childcare in the province of Manitoba, because we know that in order to build a robust economy in the province, we need to have a robust childcare sector. And so we're proud of the fact that we're maintaining the second lowest parent fees in the country. We believe that it was important to give parents that stability and that assurance that for the next 3 years, as we're coming out of this pandemic and in a post-pandemic recovery, that we are offering stability and to families as much as possible. And so that's why it was important to offer that 3-year parent freeze and to maintain those second lowest parent fees in the country. Who knows what's going to happen in the next couple of years? Maybe at the end of the 3-year term, we'll have the lowest fees in the country, and that would be certainly great as well. What's important to us is that we have a robust, affordable, accessible childcare center with a lot of funded spaces. That is why we're committing. We've created more than 4,500 spaces since we formed office, and like I said, our average number of spaces that we're creating each year is significantly higher than what was funded under the NDP. It's unfortunate that we had inherited a backlog of unfunded spaces that we needed to work towards creating opportunities so that families could access that childcare when they needed and make it affordable. And we're interested in working with all partners to ensure the sustainability of that childcare sector.
Ms. Adams.
Thank you. So is the minister then going to commit to a plan that steps up and funds their part, as the federal government says that they would like to see childcare fees cut by 50%?
Minister Squires.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And of course, the member's asking a rather hypothetical question, so I'll try to answer it as concretely as possible. As I'd explained to her earlier, that there is a negotiation process where we need to work with our federal counterparts to sign on to this bilateral agreement. What I can say is that and the member had just repeated that the federal commitment is to decrease parent funding by 50%. And so 50% of what, if you live in Ontario, and the federal government, of course, is issuing this statement country, nationwide. So if you live in Ontario and you're paying $1,600 a month for childcare, 50% of that is $800. Whereas here in Manitoba, you're already paying, the most you'd be paying for that space, a comparable space, would be $400. So if 50% of a childcare space in another part of our federation is the formula, then it means something entirely different for Manitoba, where we are already paying the second lowest parent fees in the country. And I just use that example to illustrate to the member the complexities that need to be negotiated at the table when we're talking about targets such as that. And I think that it's a lofty goal and a great target, but it means something different in every province, because as you know, there is no one set fee in the country of Canada. We have the second lowest parent fees in the province, and there is concern among some that Manitoba will be penalized for already having those second lowest parent fees by way of receiving fewer of those federal dollars that are coming in, or that potentially will be coming in through the bilateral agreement. Because like I said, if they're looking to bring those parent fees in certain parts in Ontario, for example, in line with what we have in Manitoba, as the member knows, we charge $400 for a space in our regulated centers. And if they need to backfill the amount in Toronto to make those spaces comparable, well, Manitoba's not going to be getting any of that share. And so one of the questions that we have is how to make sure that Manitoba gets its share of dollars. But to answer the member's question, are we going to be at the table negotiating with the federal government to build a greater childcare sector in the province of Manitoba? Going to be working with the federal government. We're going to be working with any of our partners who can help us build affordable, accessible childcare for all Manitobans.
Ms. Adams.
Thank you. That was an answer to a question, just not my question. Through a FIPA, we recently learned that $8.5 million was pledged towards creating a home base and workplace childcare spots. Only 1.7 of that million was spent. Can the minister please provide an update on the breakdown of what has been spent on creating new home base and workplace childcare spots?
Minister Squires.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And in my response to the last question, it was an answer specifically to the member's question when she asked me, are you going to be working with the federal government on the bilateral agreement? And my answer is yes. So I'm not sure what her misunderstanding is, but I certainly do hope that it's clarified and that she has the assurances that Manitoba will be negotiating with the federal government on building more affordable, accessible childcare in the province of Manitoba. To her most recent question, which is a reiteration of a question that she'd already asked about the money that we had provided to the chamber at the onset of the pandemic. And I had explained to her that $3.52 million has gone towards creating childcare spaces in the province of Manitoba. Her FIPA date would have been a snapshot in time. There were applications that came in after that, according to the year-end cycle. And so there have been greater expenditures. And I can share for her that that number is now $3.52 million instead of the number that she had recently cited. And then we have, again, just to give the breakdown on the $18 million expenditure, 3.52 for building new childcare spaces, 9.5 went to the Winnipeg Foundation for the Childcare Sustainability Trust to create that new revenue stream for our childcare centers. And then $4.78 million is in development right now with the Winnipeg Chamber to create those culturally appropriate, ethnically diverse childcare spaces that our government will be very pleased to be announcing and providing an update to the member in very short order. I would also like to point out that our government is very excited to be working with our Manitoba-based partners at creating, whether it be culturally appropriate childcare spaces or whether it be in creating initiatives for families to take advantage of. I would like to compare this stark contrast to what the former NDP government did when they wanted to go out and provide additional supports. They had contracted with a private for-profit company out of Australia, and they had acquired or procured services under the banner of Triple P Parenting. And I remember when I was a reporter in this building, and I would talk to the NDP minister at the time, who was very excited to be unveiling and announcing this Triple P Parenting program. And there were billboards all over the city announcing Triple P Parenting program. And this is services that the NDP had acquired from a for-profit private Australian company to get help for parents in Manitoba who needed it the most. Contrast that to our government's position, where we are working with a Made in Manitoba solution with the Winnipeg Chamber to create culturally appropriate, ethnically diverse, Made in Manitoba childcare. Our money is staying in Manitoba to get better results for Manitobans, unlike the NDP, who had to go to a for-profit private company in Australia.
Ms. Adams.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The KPMG Child Care Review and the province's newly introduced legislation on Bill 47, and the government is taking the perspective that childcare is like a business, when in reality it is an essential public service and should be treated as such and funded as such. This government has a plan to open up childcare market to private for-profit childcare providers and drastically reduce the operating grants for licensed childcare centers. The province will be eliminating the enhanced nursery grant on July 1st and will dramatically impact the amount of funded childcare funding per child in an organization receiving many of these cuts. The provincial government's proportion by 50% in response. They have been told that the province, they may double the parent fees from $5 to $10.40. Manitoba cannot build a childcare sector up as essential public services under this government's proposed funding model. Can the minister provide any research or evidence that would suggest that a move towards a for-profit childcare center would improve accessibility, affordability, and quality childcare in Manitoba?
Minister Squires.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So what I can provide the member is evidence that investing in affordable, accessible childcare is what our government is committed to. The evidence is in Budget 21, where we invested $25 million more than the NDP ever spent on childcare. The evidence is in the numbers that I had provided earlier when we saw the NDP creating 300 new spaces a year in childcare versus our government's 1,000 spaces. So 300 spaces funded by the NDP in comparison to 1,310 spaces. That's evidence. When we look at 92 spaces, one year they funded 92 spaces. Or brought 92 new spaces into the system. Compare that to 1,310, 1,184. That is the evidence that our government is invested in building affordable, accessible childcare. Let's look at some other evidence. And where we're talking about our government is working with our community partners right here in Manitoba for a Made in Manitoba solution, where we're partnering with our Winnipeg Chamber to create ethnically diverse childcare in Manitoba, made by Manitobans. What was the NDP solution? They went with an Australian for-profit private company to create a triple P parenting program that they spent millions on and advertised it on billboards all throughout the province and had thought that that was the solution to providing parents with greater opportunities to achieve their destinies. We don't believe in that approach. We are taking the approach that we need to fund more childcare spaces, that we need to offer greater funding revenues and sources to our childcare sector, which is why we've created the Childcare Sustainability Trust, which is why we're working with our partners to ensure that we've got affordable access to childcare spaces, that we can and that we can stabilize the sector. We're going to continue to invest in Manitoba families, invest in Manitoba childcare sector. And while the member might be wanting to defend her government's decision to invest in a triple P parenting program that they bought out of a foreign country and paid public dollars for private service in Australia, our government is going to continue to work with Manitobans to get childcare to the state that it needs to be in.
Ms. Adams.
Can the minister provide any research or evidence that would suggest a move towards a for-profit childcare centers would improve accessibility, affordability, and quality of childcare in Manitoba?
Minister Squires.
Minister Squires.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And the member opposite wants to talk about evidence about things that actually work in building affordable, accessible childcare for all. One of the things that our government is very committed to is the inclusion support program in our childcare centers. There's plenty of evidence that shows that when we offer inclusion support programs in our childcare centers, that they get results because children with disabilities are able to access childcare and get supports that they need. We know that in 2019-20, for example, the budget for the inclusion support program was $13.5 million, but we overexpended it by $1.9 million so that our actual expenditures in last fiscal for the inclusion support program was $15.47 million to support 1,516 children that required these services. There is strong evidence that this program works and that it is effective and that we need to continue to fund it. Our policy is that we don't turn children away from the inclusion support program. Any child who applies and needs it gets the service, and that is why we have over expenditures in that budget. And there is evidence that this program works. This is a program that we have enshrined in legislation, in Bill 47, the requirement for an inclusion support program. This is also the program that the member for Thompson voted against. All the NDP caucus, they voted against the inclusion support program being enshrined in legislation. What part of this program does the member opposite not agree with? Does she not agree that 1,516 children who required services under the inclusion support program last year didn't deserve it? Does she believe that the $15.4 million that we spent on this program was unnecessary? And does she believe that the $1.9 million over expenditure in that budget was an unnecessary expense? Can she explain to the committee and the families in the province of Manitoba who depend on these services why she voted against this being enshrined in legislation?
Ms. Adams.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. There is nothing in Bill 47 which would explicitly improve wages or working conditions for childcare professionals in Manitoba, 97% of whom are women. What are the minister's plans to ensure those working in childcare sectors will have a fair wage, safe working conditions, and access to opportunity, development, and growth?
Minister Squires?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And I inform the member that when we formed office, we knew that recruitment and retention of our early child care workers was an incredible challenge and that the sector needed to be stabilized. And we also know that we had a significant backlog in terms of funded spaces. And so working towards funding those spaces, maintaining those second lowest parent fees in the country. And right now I can also inform the member that we are working with our partners, specifically our federal counterparts who are to stabilize the sector and to have an employee enhancement initiative of some sort, working out the details with the federal government and more details to follow when I have those details. But our government is very committed to ensuring that the sector is stable. And one of the priorities in ensuring that the sector is stable is looking at some of those issues that pertain to recruitment and retention and ensuring that there are barriers and obstacles that are removed so that people will want to stay working in that sector.
Ms. Adams?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. What is the minister's plan to ensure those working in childcare sectors have access to fair wages, safe working conditions, and access to growth and development?
Minister Squires.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And of course, our government is very committed to building a safe workforce for all of our people who work in the childcare sector, whether they're ECEs or childcare aides or directors. We know that having a safe workplace is very important. That's why, and I thought that there was agreement amongst all members of the legislature that having a safe workplace would be something that we could all agree upon and support. And that is why I was very surprised to see the member vote against Bill 47, which enshrines in legislation the committee that ensures the standards and the quality and the training of the sector. That is enshrined in legislation. That is something that she voted against, and one can only surmise that the safety that she's now speaking of is not something that is important to her because she did take a stand against enshrining that in legislation, which was very unfortunate to see. I will also point out an additional touch upon something else that the member had shared with me at a different opportunity, and that was telling me about the apprenticeship program that is happening in her home community of Thompson right now that is working very effectively. I have reached out to many others in the sector and exploring further initiatives with our post-secondary institutions to ensure that we can have an even more robust apprenticeship program. And so I do want to thank the member for speaking very passionately and very eloquently about the benefits of that program and impressing upon me the need to really examine further opportunities to expand the sector through a potential apprenticeship. And so when we're talking about safety, I do want to pivot right now just to some of the measures that we have taken to ensure that everyone who works in this sector is safe during COVID. That is why we upgraded the masks that all our ECs and aides that work in childcare are receiving level 3 grade medical grade masks, and that we've increased the number of masks to 1.1 million masks per month, which equates to 4 masks per day per worker for anyone who is working in the sector. In addition, we're giving 7,580 eye protection pieces, and we'll continue to work to ensure that our everyone who goes to work in our childcare sector has the equipment necessary and to be safe. We think that the training is safe. That is why we enshrined that component in our legislation. And apprenticeship is also another key factor in terms of getting people trained, and so that they're confident and capable in all regards to conduct their duties on a regular basis when they're working in childcare. And so I'd be remiss if I didn't say how fortunate we are to have so many people in the sector who are going to work even now as we see we're in the third wave and there's challenging circumstances. And I want to take a moment to thank many of those who are in the sector for going to work and doing that job of watching the children of our critical services workers day in and day out. And I've heard from many of them, and I had an opportunity to thank many of them personally, and will continue to do so in all the channels that I have available to me given the pandemic. But I want to say in committee for the record that we are incredibly grateful for the service that they are providing each and every day to our critical services workers.
Ms. Adams.
Thank you. The minister touches about safety and talks about how it's so important for safety, and talked about the masks that were going to the childcare centers. I wonder if the minister will take it upon herself to do an investigation on how expired masks made it into our childcare sector, because I'm sure we can all agree that did not promote a safe working environment, and we don't want to see something like that happen again.
Minister Squires.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I see that we're almost coming to our end of our time, and I must admit that that time flew by very quickly. Given that I have probably under a minute to respond, I'll try to be quick in my response, but our government is very committed to ensuring that the safety of the sector. That is why we announced that we were upgrading to the level 3 medical grade masks, and that we have expedited the shipment of those masks to all of our childcare sector. We know that right now we're dealing with a variant that is incredibly contagious, and the transmission rates are certainly escalating and of concern. That is why we've increased the amount of masks that we're sending out to the sector to 1.1 million masks per month, with a total of up to 4 masks per day.
Order. The hour being 5 p.m. Committee rise.